All right. Hello, everyone. We did it. We made it. I am Courtney Reyes. I'm the executive director of One Iowa. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am here with the Keenan Crow. Oh my goodness, Keenan, tell us about the last 24 hours.
It was a roller coaster. This last week alone has been an absolute roller coaster. We heard on Monday that this trans athletics ban was moving forward, that there was probably nothing that we could do to stop it, and that, it was just inevitable. And we activated our supporters, y'all, sent emails, made phone calls. We worked with, other community leaders to put pressure on legislative leaders. And here we are. It didn't make it. And that's huge, right? And we know it's coming back next year. We have no misapprehensions about that. The Iowa Speaker of the House has said as much publicly, that he intends to bring this legislation back next year. But time, I think, is on our side for a number of reasons. And one of the primary reasons is this is a knee jerk reaction to a bunch of misinformation about transgender people. This gives us the time and the space to introduce evidence, to talk about the actual science here, to talk about the real harm that it would do to transgender kids who are already an extremely vulnerable group of young people. So, are we done? Absolutely not. Not even close. But is this a major, major win? I think it is. I really do think that this, um, gives us a much better shot of defending against this in the long term. If it would have passed this year, who knows how long it would have taken to repeal. So, let's not jinx ourselves. Let's not get ahead of ourselves and say that this is gone forever, because it's not. It's coming back, and we're going to have a big fight on our hands next year. But this gives us the time to prepare.
Absolutely. I love how you said that. And you're talking specifically about the trans youth sports ban,
Yes.
but there were 15 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced this legislative session, which is a new record for Iowa.
Yep.
And sweeping the country, there are so many bills. So talk to me why it's so important that we were able to stop all of those with our incredible coalition of folks, because that's not the case around the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's really not. This has been a really horrible year for LGBTQ equality in state legislatures, and specifically for transgender Americans. So many pieces of legislation have been introduced to try to restrict their rights, their participation in public. So back in 2019, there were about 35 anti-transgender bills introduced nationwide. In 2020, that number goes up to 100. And in 2021, that number is 144. And that's just the last time I checked. It's probably higher now, because I haven't checked for a good week or so. And even worse, some of these are passing. Some, especially the trans athletics bans, are passing with an alarming rate. I believe there's already 7 states that have them, and Florida is slated to sign one into law as well. So, and we've seen other horrific measures across the country too that aren't just the athletic stuff. The bans on access to medically necessary health care are probably the most horrific. There's some seriously awful stuff going on in Tennessee. They've passed already 4 anti-transgender bills, one of which requires businesses to put signs up in their windows announcing if they allow people to use the restroom that matches their gender identity, and use such horrible language to do so. So that just some really, really awful stuff all across the country. And again, keeping it out of Iowa was no small feat. We have so many people to thank. It was not just us, not by any stretch of the imagination. If it was just us, we would not be in a very good position right now. I can tell you that much. It was Interfaith Alliance, it was Planned Parenthood, it was ACLU, it was the HRC folks, and our friends Sandy and John, who lobby on their behalf here in Iowa. It was supportive legislators like Liz Bennett and Zach Walls, and so many others who helped us know what information they needed so that they could start talking to their own caucuses. It was, I mean, so many people who sent emails and made phone calls and showed up and talked to their legislators, and so many other folks. I can't possibly remember them all off the top of my head because there were so many different folks in the community, so many strong leaders who helped us push back against this. And, we're eternally grateful for them and their help.
Absolutely. I We are such a small and mighty team that we cannot do this.
Right.
We get to be, I'm grateful we get to be a part of it and help lead this charge, but this is not a one person show. We are
Not even
we
close.
have so many people working so hard to protect LGBTQ Iowans, because I think sometimes folks forget. I'm talking about maybe the people that introduce these bills or support these bills, of even if they don't pass, the harm that it causes to the LGBTQ community, and the message we're sending to our trans kiddos in our state, is so incredibly cruel.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's at the core of what we do every single day, is that we want to improve the lives of LGBTQ Iowans. So stopping this legislation is one piece, but knowing that work is never, it's not done.
Absolutely, and it does not just real harm to the mental health of LGBTQ people, both kids and adults. Right? If you, I know how I feel when I see that stuff, and it's basically goes, if they're willing to do this thing to kids, what are they willing to do to adults? Because kids are folks that we normally assume are vulnerable, and we're going to try to protect them to the best of our ability. So it's scary. But the other thing that it does is it does real reputational harm to the state, and we've seen that over and over again. That folks saying out loud that they're willing to entertain this, going on Fox News, and saying that they want this to happen, has an impact not just on the businesses that are willing to locate themselves here, which it does, but also on the talent that's willing to locate here. The goal of attracting, recruiting, and retaining the top talent is in direct opposition to this goal of trying to minimize and exclude LGBTQ people. Um, and every year, the Business Record comes out with their analysis of what the state needs, not the Business Record, excuse me, the Iowa Business Council comes out with their analysis of what the state needs. And every year, what they say is we need more people to move to Iowa, that our population growth numbers just are not sufficient
Mhm.
to fill the jobs that are available here. And so, how do we do that? Well, we don't do that by arbitrarily excluding an entire group of people, whether it's those kids themselves or their parents. I mean, if your kid can't play on the soccer team or the basketball team, and that's their favorite thing, are you really going to move to a state where that's illegal? Absolutely not. That's devastating to your kid. Why would you do that to your kid?
Or
I don't
that
know
you know
anybody who would do
the
that to them.
legislature is continuously going to attack your child. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing that.
No, no, that's absurd. So yeah, I hope that folks can start recognizing that what we need are synergistic policies, and the way that we get those is by focusing on policies that do the greatest good for all Iowans, not just targeting a small amount of Iowans. Because you know who does who do these bills help? Aside from the politicians themselves, not really anyone, right? It doesn't make any Iowan's life better to exclude transgender people from something. That's just not how things work. It just makes somebody's life worse. And so let's focus on policies that make people's lives better. That seems like a bare minimum ask, and that's the ask we'll be making.
That will be some tough work. So while we're celebrating, and I always say one of my favorite parts of being a human being is I get to have hold more than one emotion at once. So while I have this great relief and joy, and just kind of sheer excitement, I think it's more just relief right now. I'll get to excitement of these bills being dead. Our hearts are heavy because we know that there are some things that made it out of session that are headed for the governor's desk that will definitely impact not only LGBTQ people, but our broader community at large, that we just really don't agree with. And so I'd love for you to tell us about those. Are there action steps that we need to be doing? What should we do now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this legislative session was, obviously we killed off all of the specific anti-LGBTQ stuff, but that doesn't mean there's not still things alive that disproportionately impacted LGBTQ folks and are still bad for our state. And so I do think, today is a real mixed bag of feelings. As Walt Whitman said, we contain multitudes, right? We can feel all these things. We can feel very excited that they decided not to go specifically after LGBTQ folks, but also very disappointed in some of the other actions that have been taken. So, one of those things is, of course, the diversity and inclusion training preclusion. Stopping trainings that include concepts like implicit bias, systemic racism, etc., from any governmental body, not just schools like the original proposal, but also state, county governments, etc. Folks who need to be hearing these things, arguably. So that's one thing that you can contact the governor and ask her to veto because she has not signed it yet. The other thing is the anti-protester legislation or the policing legislation, however you want to look at that, which is devastating. They analyzed 8 different penalty increases through the Nonpartisan Legislative Services Agency, and 7 out of the 8 will increase racial disparity within Iowa jails and prisons, which is already some of the worst in the country. So this is legislation that is going to have an impact on people of color. It's going to have an impact on LGBTQ people. It's going to have an impact on a whole lot of folks who are doing nothing more than going out and expressing their dissatisfaction with the current state of things, with the current state of policing, with the current state of public safety here in Iowa. And that's not okay. And that's why that's one of the pieces of legislation we have prioritized this year. And we have an action alert out about it right now, which we'll have here in the description on this video. So please go through the description, click on that link, and send the governor a message telling her to listen to the recommendations of her own focus committee that she put together on criminal justice policy. This legislation has nothing to do with any of those recommendations. It leaves out several key pieces like the ban on racial profiling, for instance. And so we want to hold her to that promise. She said she was going to hold that committee. She was going to look at the recommendations and make recommendations on that basis. That's not what happened. And so we need to insist on bipartisan public safety legislation that prioritizes the safety of all Iowans, not just a few.
Absolutely. That's a reoccurring theme for the legislative session. And I know that it's easy to be disheartened and to feel like we just keep the swings keep coming as the issues that we care greatly about continue.
Yes. Oh, and I can't forget also to go follow Planned Parenthood and make your thoughts known about another thing that passed that we were registered against, which is the abortion constitutional amendment that would remove the right to abortion under Iowa's constitution. So that is also something that is a big deal.
Mhm.
Now, the governor has no say in that. And so, unfortunately, you can't just go contact the governor. But if you go and follow Planned Parenthood, they can give you more information on next steps, where this is headed, what the trajectory of that looks like, because it has to be voted on again in the next legislative session. And then if that happens, it's going to go to a vote of the full state. So lots to do between now and the time that it gets on the ballot, if it gets on the ballot, and hopefully we can turn the tide in the next cycle and make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So we're all tired.
Yeah.
Like, we're worn out. So I try to keep the motto of resist, rest, repeat, resist, rest, repeat, because we have to keep resting and taking care of ourselves. And we know that there's been so much hard work that's gone into this. But as soon as people are feeling back on their feet, and have a little energy back, what are some things for folks to do outside of the legislative session? How can we be making an impact for LGBTQ folks, when we don't have those bills flying at us? What's our plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you need to do is, if you haven't contacted your legislator yet, you need to set up a meeting and have a conversation with your legislator about why this stuff is important and about what your feelings are on it. Um, this goes double if you live in a rural area, and triple if you live in a Republican controlled area.
Yeah.
The second thing that you can do is start talking to your friends, your family members, your coworkers about why this matters, and about why it's not just in your interest or in your family's interest, but why it's in the interest of all Iowans. Why we're going to continue to have not enough people to fill all the jobs here in this state, because we simply just don't have enough people willing to move here under this climate. We need to start having those tough conversations with those who are closest to us, who may not completely agree, and but engaging them in those conversations is one of the bare minimum things that needs to happen before we can move forward from this point. So start talking to your legislators, start having those conversations. Look out for any legislative forums that are happening between now and the next legislative session, and we'll be letting you know of some of those things, of course. But those are always great ways to get in front of your legislator as well and bring up the issues that are important to you. Of course, if you are involved in a business, an organization, etc., reach out and see what your business is doing to help. Can they register against this kind of stuff? Can they speak out against this kind of stuff? We're going to need so many people, so many leaders, so many business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders, people of every different kind of stripe to speak out against this when it comes back next year. And so start organizing now. We will, of course, be there to guide that process, to let you know when there's opportunities. But organizing is not something that just I do or you do. It's also something that we do in our own communities. So start thinking about how you can use your power, your privilege, to push for some change in your own spaces, because that's going to help more than anything.
Yeah, we can't just have the same group of people continuously showing up. We have to keep expanding our reach and really looking at statewide, how do we have those maybe sometimes very difficult conversations with people, or uncomfortable conversations, so we can keep pushing forward for LGBTQ folks who deserve to live and thrive in our state. And we want them. We want that for us and for them. Like that's what we fight for every single day. So also, legislators don't have as much going on right now. Like,
Yes.
obviously, give them a couple of weeks and then get those
They're all
files.
going to go on vacation.
They will never answer your email right now, probably. But like this summer, hit them up, and that's when we have some of the most meaningful conversations with folks. Is when we're outside of session and where the temperature is lower just a little bit, so you can really be able to talk about the things that are really important to you. So,
Absolutely.
um, it's been a wild one. I don't know how many days we are into this session, but it's over.
130 some.
Oh, but we didn't make it to June. Thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, Keenan, as always, my heart goes is with you, just because of how much time and effort and energy you put into this, and we cannot do this work without you. So I appreciate all that you do. Do you have any final closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
The only other thing that I can say is this work is not free. It takes a lot
Yeah.
of time and resources and energy, and so we would really appreciate your generous donations toward helping us continue this level of defense
Absolutely.
against all these bad measures. So please, think about how significant it was that not a single piece of legislation that targeted LGBTQ folks passed this legislation, or passed this year,
Mhm.
and open your heart and your pocketbook toward that continuing on.
Absolutely. Reoccurring donations are one of the best ways to support our org. We have lots of folks that even do $5 a month, but that's money that comes into our door every month. And the power of so many people doing $5 or $10 a month, obviously we will accept those large donations as well. Never turned one of those down. But know that, like, I love what you said. This work, it doesn't happen for free. This is all of our time and energy.
Especially those last second interventions. Those are often some of the costliest. So think of all the things that we had to do in the last week and how much they might have cost, and try to chip away at that, because it's definitely, yeah, like you said, not free at all.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you and appreciate chatting with you today. And I have been looking forward to this wrap up call since they gavelled in. So
Um,
I am glad we are here.
Same. All right.
All right. Thanks,
Well,
y'all. Have a great day.
yeah, have a good one, and we'll see you soon.
All right.